thank you all for being here today for our XR Streaming All Night, where we're going to be talking about empowering the next level of AR/VR applications. For those of you, I'm sure many of you are already familiar, we've seen explosive growths in everything from smart glasses to VR headsets, emerging and getting more and more powerful all of the time, with more and more corporate adoption on a regular basis. But one thing still always seems to be an issue is that there's just never quite enough power. And one of the things that we're talking about is as we develop more and more sophisticated XR applications, as it becomes a more immersive experience, what is it that's going to really take us that next level? And so today, XR Streaming, we hope, is the answer. We've got a really incredible group of panelists here today who are going to let us know sort of what's available now, what's maybe available in the near future, and some of the challenges that we're facing. So we'll be diving in. I know we've got some incredible perspectives here, everyone from an end user to developers to service providers, and of course, the cloud itself. So without further ado, just a couple quick announcements from me, and I promise we'll dive into the fun stuff. So of course, as for those of you that don't already know, AWE hosts All Nights regularly, generally in person, but now online all across the world. We always encourage you to get involved in those. Of course, you can see these nice and big ones here. Those are our annual conferences. We do actually have 2 annual conferences coming up. Traditionally, we have 4, but would love for you to join us, hopefully again in person. It'd be great to see all of you again after so long. The first will be AWE Asia, September 2nd and September 3rd in China, and followed by AWUSA in November 9th through 11th in this traditional Santa Clara. We're super excited to see everyone come back together again, and we really do hope to see you there. Of course, in this virtual world we're living in, social is one of the few ways we can connect today. And so we do encourage you, reach out to us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and of course, watch all of our sessions like this one on YouTube. We also have a variety of other upcoming All Nights, so please do take the moment to look at some of our upcoming events. We always want to give you a chance to join in and get more involved. And of course, a very special thanks today to our sponsor, HoloLight. It is through our sponsors that we're able to host these number of different sessions, both in person and online. And super grateful to have the chance to talk about XR streaming today, which I know is a super relevant topic to many of you. But that's enough from me. So I am today your host, Partnership Director of AWE and President of Sunrise International, Gavin Newton-Tanzer. But I'm joined here with a terrific group of people. We'll give each of them a chance to have a quick 1-minute intro, tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll dive into some exciting questions. So first, without further ado, Suzie Borders, who is the CEO and co-founder of BadVR. Suzanne, Suzie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. As Gavin said, I'm the CEO and co-founder of BadVR. For those of you who don't know, BadVR is an immersive data visualization and analytics company. So we basically take really large, complex data sets and port them into virtual and augmented reality, with the goal being to make the discovery of insights faster, easier, and more universally accessible to everyone. We're on a mission to democratize insight. My background is in product and UX design. I've been doing that for the past 8 years prior to founding BadVR. So working on 2D interfaces for data viz, data analytics. So basically I hit every conceivable limitation offered by 2D, which is what inspired me to add multiple dimensions to data sets. So that's a little brief background about me. I'm based here in Los Angeles. BadVR has been in operation now for, well, since 2018, so a couple years.
Awesome. Thank you, Suzie, and looking forward to hearing more about the developer perspective on streaming. And also joined here with Evan Helda, who is a senior specialist in spatial computing at Amazon Web Services. So Evan, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, absolutely excited to be here. So I'm Evan. I currently lead go-to-market strategy here at AWS for spatial computing. So we consider that the spectrum of emergence, so all things AR, VR, and 3D. My foray into this space was when I was leading sales and partnerships at a company called Meta, one of the OG headset companies that had an AR headset, big field of view, a tether. And we didn't need streaming with that headset because we had access to a really powerful GPU with a workstation. But that's where I got exposure to the world of visualizing CAD data, 3D data pipelines, the need to have higher fidelity experiences for lots of use cases. And I've made it my mission to make streaming a thing here at AWS ever since. Many of you probably know the history of Meta. It suffered an unfortunate demise. The assets still exist. There's a company called Campfire 3D that is basically the Meta 3 headset. So go check that out. But after that, I went to Improbable. And Improbable was building the back end services needed to build out the metaverse, basically, right? If you want to have thousands of people in a massive game world with persistence in the game world and all kinds of simulation going on, you needed to use something like what Improbable offers, which is Spatial OS. They're still kicking around. They actually just did a really awesome 4,000 person demo with Spatial OS last week. It's pretty awesome. You should check it out. A game called Scavengers. And yeah, now I'm here trying to make AR, VR thing and put a digital layer on top of the world. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Evan. And now, Dr. Nicholas Schalhammer, I hope I pronounced that okay, product manager for engineering and visualization at XR at BMW, who will hopefully be representing sort of the end user client perspective for XR streaming today. So Nico, tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Gavin. You did really great. So I've been with the BMW Group for the last 8 years, currently as a product manager for engineering visualization and XR. I'm based in Munich at our research and development center, and my job is actually to make engineering 3D data, which can be quite complex, available to every employee. So for that purpose, we are building a cloud-based platform that enables us to deliver consumer-like user experiences in handling these data sets. And since XR streaming is an important piece of this puzzle, I'm really excited to be part of this event.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Louis Bollinger, co-founder and CMO of HoloLite. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. My name is Louis. Yeah, I'm one of the co-founders here at HoloLite. We are located here in Munich, Germany, and as well as in Austria. And yeah, we provide software and technology in the AR/VR industry, and we have a special focus on the topic of XR streaming. So that's why I'm very happy that I can join this panel today. And yeah, I basically started to jump on the topic when I was writing my bachelor thesis. Then I basically co-founded HoloLite in 2015. And we did lots of projects and also our own product development here. Worked together with different enterprises from a variety of sectors. And yeah, we saw that there are some major challenges in the AR/VR industry, and that basically XR streaming can really be a game changer and solve a few of the major issues. And that's why I'm looking forward to the next hour.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Louis. So I'm going to go ahead and close down the slides so we can actually see everyone's charming faces. But let's actually go ahead and, Louis, have you start with the first question. Let's build a little bit of context about today's conversation. As a service provider in XR streaming, what are some of the trends that you're seeing? What are some of the major points that you think are relevant for today's conversation?
Yeah, well, we see that many enterprises, basically all of them, have to face digital transformation. We see also within the last years that more and more digital content is created. And then definitely the next question is, how can we consume all this digital data in the best way? And I think that XR as a technology in general really provides the opportunity to improve the content consumption and play the key role in the future. And yeah, when we were talking to all these companies out there, we saw also that there is a trend to mobile. If you think about Facebook, which they go from the Oculus Rift S business to the Oculus Quest 2 business, which is a clear statement. They go from tethered smart glasses to fully mobile devices. We can also see that there is like an increased quality requirement from the user side. So AR/VR content needs to be detailed, needs to be realistic. And this is like one of the major trends. And the last one is also the cloud and 5G topic. We see more and more cloud services. We see more and more companies that are open for this topic and that want to make use of it. And I think that all these topics are something like the breeding ground for XR streaming, which provides definitely the opportunity to use all those performance from the cloud, from external servers, and bring it on mobile devices. And I think all these trends show that XR streaming is a relevant topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, let's carry on with that. So Nico, at BMW, tell us about the role that AR/VR is playing in your work, and how are you thinking about streaming in terms of the future of work, manufacturing, production?
Sure. So BMW has a really long history of using XR. We were actually one of the very first automotive OEMs to apply virtual reality in our development processes. starting as early as the 1990s, actually, so 30 years of experience. Back then, VR was a quite cumbersome affair, though. You needed these big and expensive VR caves, as well as complicated expert tools to run a VR use case. Therefore, the technology was reserved to a few select users and specialized use cases. But over the years, the technology has matured a lot, especially in the last 5 years or so, where we have seen big improvements, both in the software as well as in the hardware department. So just to give 2 examples from the hardware perspective, consumer electronic devices have reached such a high level of sophistication that they are now a viable option for scaled enterprise use cases. So you can buy for a couple of $100, you can buy viable VR headsets. And from the software side, around 6 years ago, we actually started to employ game engines to produce XR experiences, which give us a much higher flexibility in the creation of interactive XR experiences than the previously used specialized tools. So all these improvements have led to a steadily growing number of users, but also to more demanding use cases, which brought to light a whole new set of challenges, such as overcoming limited hardware performance of XR devices, efficient scaling and of content creation, content distribution, the management, et cetera, et cetera. And this is really where XR streaming comes into play. So XR streaming has a positive impact on practically all of these challenges, and we will talk about it later in detail. But for now, I just want to make the point that XR streaming is a key technical enabler for us to scale the application of XR, transforming XR from a specialized technology reserved to a select few users to an everyday working tool, similar to a laptop or a smartphone.
Awesome. I think that's what we're all looking to see. Hopefully, eventually sophisticated AR, VR headsets being able to be utilized in daily life and daily work. So that's great to hear that you're making such progress there. Evan, let's take a little bit of a different perspective. So you must see tons of different uses and applications in the cloud. What are sort of your take on what are some of the trends you're seeing, examples that you're seeing with people trying to leverage AWS for XR streaming?
Yeah. A few I can speak to. I mean, one trend I keep seeing is, or theme perhaps, is, you know, people want to jump right into a headset experience, and they think that's where they need to be right away. But then they quickly realize that, you know, full immersion isn't super necessary. And we see customers try to scramble to the latest and greatest technology. We need to kind of slow your roll a little bit. It's work backwards from the use case. Let's work backwards from what the end user is really trying to accomplish. And oftentimes they can just pull up their tablet and visualize something that's not a huge piece of machinery. It's something kind of small, or maybe it is a big piece of machinery, but scale doesn't matter in that use case. They're just trying to get a quick insight about something. So really quickly, people end up going from headsets right back down to devices. But then there's such a wide array of users within one experience sometimes where you might need one person needs a headset. So the trend that I'm getting to is just the importance of cross-platform streaming. HoloLight does it, or is soon to be doing it quite well across the HoloLens and iOS devices. But that's the first trend is, you know, what is the use case? What is the customer experience? What level of immersion do you really need? Headset isn't super important, perhaps. And then if you do need a headset, let's talk about multi-users in multiple different scenarios, and just plug in a HoloLight to go make that happen. So that's kind of upstream of the actual trend around use cases. And in terms of use cases themselves, you know, everyone on this call, I'm seeing some familiar names. Everyone knows that training is the biggest use case. And for a lot of industries, for training, you don't really need streaming, just because it's not you don't need a high fidelity 3D model or super high fidelity asset. You can get away with more game like cartoonish experience oftentimes. That's obviously changing, right? So we tell people like, hey, yes, you don't need streaming today for that, but let's start testing it now, because the next wave of devices is coming is going to be half the size and a much better form factor like what you're wearing now, Gavin. And so let's start getting you smart on streaming and getting you to have an opinion on this space. But despite the fact that training isn't always needing streaming, there are many industries where training does require super heavy 3D models, heavy assets. And that's really right now, primarily in defense, is where we're seeing the biggest demand for streaming. You know, it's kind of self-explanatory, but they're pulling in pretty big pieces of equipment, whether it's a tank or a warplane, or some kind of weapon system, or any kind of piece of machinery that you see out on the front lines. Oftentimes need streaming. But it's not just the size of 3D file, it's also, you need a higher fidelity experience when you're training the warfighter, as they say, right? You can't be cartoonish. You need the Call of Duty type of level of fidelity. You know, from the other big use case where streaming is, we're seeing a requirement is there's a lot of talk around digital twins. It gets tossed around a bit too nonchalantly, and it's not. People aren't very precise when they say the word digital twin. They often just mean a digital representation of a thing. But still, even for digital twins, with sensor data infused into it is oftentimes a pretty realistic model. And it's something massive, right? It's an oil rig, it's a factory, it's something that is inherently a large 3D data set. And so when they're trying to do remote operations or predictive maintenance from people at HQ, you got to stream that into a device. And they don't always need a headset for that. It's oftentimes a tablet-based streaming experience. And then with a digital twin, it then leads to this next conversation that we're seeing, this next third trend, which is, okay, what about doing actual digital overlays? And right, and so that's when there's some real challenges. Is okay, how do you do streaming when the object isn't just floating on top of a table for design review, but you're actually having to attach the hologram to the real world? And there's a lot of problems there with latency, which is, we can get into that later. I think that's one of our next topics, but you know, latency becomes a requirement. But the other big trend, just to finalize that, is just people want to anchor a BMW engine in the BMW itself and make it super accurate. And you need a pretty unique streaming protocol that can stream not just the graphics, but also the computer vision data as well. The final thing I'll mention that we're seeing is just this need for hybrid architectures, and we're seeing more customers start to ask us about the Qualcomm boundless XR chipset, and thinking about how they deploy that over 5G with private MEC deployments, which is mobile edge cloud type stuff, which again we'll get to later with the edge compute and latency conversation. But thinking about hybrid architectures between the device, the edge, and the cloud, and thinking about the data flow and where that workload needs to reside based on the use case is a big topic we're discussing quite a bit. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that helped. That also provide incredible context. I think some of the use cases that you're seeing. I mean, it's good to know the military's there, but hopefully we all get to experience it sometime soon as well. But let's take things to a particular use case. So Suzie, I know you visualize enormous data sets, and that's a big part of what you do. How do you leverage XR streaming, or how do you integrate it into your workflow to optimize your processes?
Yeah, so there are a lot of challenges that we face with visualizing really large, complex data sets. And one of the biggest challenges is actually how to get the data physically onto the headset, which at that point, then we can visualize it and the end user can experience it. Getting that data onto the headset is just very difficult. Streaming can help solve that problem by putting the data in use wherever it is, instead of transmitting the visual analysis. So this essentially can turn the headset into more of a processor, or I'm sorry, into more of a receiver, less than a processor, which can actually cut down the headset weight, size, temperature, etc. So it takes the processing from the headset and can put it up into a cloud. And that also obviously makes it more of a display, more so than a self-contained computer. So ultimately, it really just helps us get the data into the headset in a way that's less heavy, I guess, and requires less processing, which then of course makes the headset for the end user fit much more easily and be something that they would be a little bit more willing to maybe put on their head. Some of those bigger, bulkier headsets, while they have a lot of processing power, and that's great for us when we have to load the data onto the headset, it can be off-putting for some people, and it can be just a little bit too much. So I would say that streaming just takes that burden away from having to put the data, all the data onto the headset. So yeah.
Awesome. I mean, that's excellent context. So it's in some ways, it seems like it's simplifying your job a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's making the whole, processing on device, because there's always limited processing on those devices. It's removing those limitations. So that's obviously really great for us.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I think we've had a great initial context provided by each of our panelists. We actually have some specific examples prepared today, too. So we're going to actually have Louis and Nico, who were generous enough to kind of prepare some slides for us with some of these examples we'll dive into briefly, and then come back to some more questions. So first, let's go ahead and start with you, Louis.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think what we want to do at HoloLite is we want to unleash the potential of XR, because we think that we did not get all out of it yet. And I think our approach is to do that with XR streaming and more specific with our ISA SDK. So if we jump to the next slide, we're doing basically AR/VR development now since more than 6 years, and we specialize especially in this topic. And we work with different enterprises, such as the one that are listed here from the automotive sector. BMW is one of them, and but also from the healthcare sector, from the mechanical engineering sector. So many companies that have to handle data in some way. And one of the major issues that we saw is that due to the limited performance of mobile devices, it's really a challenge to prepare data and get it on the device. And this is why we came up with a solution that we have on the next slide. And it's called ISA SDK. It stands for Interactive Streaming for Augmented Reality. And to summarize a little bit, what we basically do is we outsource the rendering process and take it from the mobile XR device to more powerful external servers, the cloud, and let them do the job basically. And for developers, it basically looks like this, that if we look on the architecture here on the left side, the ISA SDK is integrated into the AR/VR application. This is a process that takes just around about 30 minutes. And from this moment on, the entire app is running on a server and no longer on the device. And what the user, the end user does now is the user with the XR device connects to that server. And what we then generate is a real-time streaming of the entire AR/VR application. So we're sending rendered images to the user, and the user interacts with gestures, for example. This information is sent back, and this is a real-time process generating that streaming. And I have a few examples in a video here that should show the potential of the technology. The first one is a comparison between a locally rendered application on HoloLens and an application rendered via the cloud, AWS in this case. And as you can see, the model gets more realistic, and this is what we want to have. You can use visual render intense effects, but also the same with the number of polygons. If you think about engineering files, 3D CAD models, you want to have it in detail, and you want to have up to millions, hundreds of millions of polygons. And the same as well with point clouds, for example. In this case, one of our partners visualized a ship with 1 billion points. And that's really an amazing number, and all now running on the XR device without data preparation, out of the box, so that we can get the best benefit out of the data. And yeah, if we then jump to the next slide, I would like to summarize the benefits a little bit. So we think that with XR streaming, this can empower existing AR/VR applications, but it can also create new use cases that were impossible before. You have basically unlimited performance depending on your server. So if there's a strong GPU, then make use of it. You are free to choose the infrastructure that fits for your use case. If you go via cloud, you can also think about new business models. We'll talk about that later, I think. Then cross-platform, something Evan mentioned before. It's a very relevant topic. So we want to not just stream to one device, but to several devices. Security gets better, and especially for developers, the integration process and the effort is very low. Integration process simple, and the overall app development gets more simple. And I would like to end this short input here with an offer to engage more with the topic. Now in this panel, definitely, but also afterwards. So if you want to dive deeper, then you can take a look in our XR streaming white paper, where you get information on how it could look like on the cloud, what are case studies, and all these kinds of information. But also for developers, if you want to give it a try and implement it into your own AR/VR application, then go check out the sign up for the SDK. You get a free trial and you're free to test it. And I can only recommend it. It's less effort. So yeah, it's worth a visit.
Awesome.
I think we've shared the links in the chat also, so that makes it more simple for you to go there. And I'll hand over back to you, Gavin.
Yeah, I love this idea of limitless power. I think definitely something I'm going to see. I see a lot of developers sort of smiling and nodding. I think that should go over well. Well, thank you for those examples. I think that video was particularly compelling. For those of you who want to see it again, we will be saving this presentation and making it available afterwards. Also, we were lucky enough to have Nico prepare some good examples and an overview here for us. So Nico, why don't you take it away?
Sure. So this first slide illustrates how we apply XR technologies along the entire development process, starting from early design stages where we visualize new car concepts with high-end ray tracing models, allowing our designers and decision makers to look at new designs the way the real customer would do years later. And the application of game engines then allows us to design new and interactive user experiences fully digitally, as we've shown with the BMW iNext, for example, at CES 2 years ago. And moving further down the process, let's talk about production planning. So BMW has more than 30 plants all over the world. And every time a new car model is launched, we have to make structural changes to our plant layouts. This can now be done in VR, where the production planning team can immerse themselves into digital representations of any of our global plants while collaborating remotely and in real time from the home base. And once the car finally enters the market, then XR enables us to deliver engaging user experiences to our customers. We actually have rolled out to more than 2,400 dealerships our so-called emotional virtual experience, which allows our customers to experience all the different variants, colors, and trim levels our cars come in, and showing them exactly how the future BMW or Mini will look like. And actually, all of these use cases can benefit from XR streaming. And to show you how, let's have a deeper look into the vehicle integration use case on the next slide, please. So what is vehicle integration? Vehicle integration is the process of making sure that all of the thousands of components of a car can be assembled into one functioning vehicle, while at the same time complying with all our production requirements and quality standards. And vehicle integration is thereby a crucial part of automotive development and traditionally relies really heavily on hardware prototypes, which are costly and time consuming. With augmented reality, we were able to overlay real prototypes with true to scale models, meaning that instead of having to build complete vehicle prototypes, we now only need to build a small portion of the car, for example, in use cases where haptic feedback is necessary, while the rest is being displayed digitally. And at the beginning, because of the limited computational power of XR devices, our AR use cases were kind of restricted to visualize only smaller components or smaller assemblies of the car. But now, thanks to XR streaming and the solution that we have developed together with HoloLight, we are able to visualize entire cars consisting of more than 4,000 to 5,000 parts and more than 100 million polygons without any manual data preparation and without having to store data locally on any device. So this allows us to assess a whole range of concept variants and assembly processes in a more flexible and cost-efficient manner than before. And beside the cost savings, another big benefit to us is that this AR-based prototyping process speeds up the whole evaluation process by up to 12 months, meaning that we have more mature concepts in earlier design stages. So I hope this gave you kind of an idea why we're so excited about XR streaming. And yeah, with that, I hand over to you, Gavin.
That's amazing. No, I love being able to just see the images of actual engineers using the technology, saving money, potentially even iterating and evolving new car concepts even faster than before. Like you said, just unleashing the power beyond the devices. So yeah, that's really exciting and cool to see. But Suzie, let's come back and talk to an actual developer. So let's hear what is the process actually like when you take something like an app that you're working on or a use case that you're working on, and you want to go ahead and plug in streaming. What has that process been like? What are some of the challenges, or how has that been working out for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, it really opens up a world of new possibilities, because prior to having this streaming, you're really confined to the processing power that's on the device the user is wearing or holding. Adding in XR streaming, gives you a whole nother dimension, so to speak, of processing power, meaning that you can do a lot more with it. We actually were part of the XR Code Jam, my team. A bunch of us sort of jumped in to play with it. And to be honest, like prior to doing this, we hadn't done a lot with XR streaming. We'd really tried to make the best use of the processing power on the headset that we could. And I think we do a good job of that. But playing with XR streaming was like, wow, this is a whole new world. So over the time and experimentation, integrating it, I really started to understand the impact that it had in the immediate, but also the potential that it can bring to us in the future. Overall, it was really simple to integrate. only had to install a plugin and everything worked pretty much magically, which is something that very rarely happens as a developer, like very, very rarely. This allowed us to iterate so much faster, test so much more easily on the device, and deploy a much richer visual experience on the target headsets that we were using. From a developer's perspective as well, the API documentation was great. And of course, the HoloLite team are amazing people, and they were really easy to contact for detailed questions that we had. They had great answers. So in my opinion, there's no reason not to at least try it. I really do think it can solve some problems that you might be struggling with as a developer, but also it might end up being a solution to problems that you haven't even discovered yet. And I know that was definitely true for us, the possibilities of it. Oh, well, now that we have this capability, we can do X, Y, and Z, something that had never even occurred to us before. So overall, I mean, I think it was just an amazing experience to work with it. Amazing to see this being a possibility now. Yeah, so that's really been my experience, and I couldn't speak more highly of it.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Suzie. I think that helps contextualize it for a lot of developers. And Evan, as the cloud begins to have more and more use cases, more people trying to do this streaming, what are some of the key factors that you think people should be thinking of? Are there any numbers or statistics, bandwidth, latency, GPU that people should benchmark against, or any recommendations you have there?
Yeah, definitely. There's a few things we try to talk about before we get to the topic of actually doing XR streaming. So the first would be decimation of models. The next is from there GPU performance and GPUs. From there it's wireless connectivity, and then it ends with latency. But so back up to the top there. So upstream of the application, I think a lot of people probably know about the process you have to go through to first find the CAD model. So that's oftentimes quite the effort for some companies. They don't exactly have like a single source of truth of CAD data easily accessible, right? Yes, there's PLM systems, but those are stuck within design engineering orgs. They're on-prem. They're these curmudgeon-y old platforms that aren't easily accessible via the cloud. So we try to get companies to think about 3D asset management, 3D data management, having a single source of truth that is in the cloud and very user-friendly. Think like a enterprise grade level of like Sketchfab. The Sketchfab is a good solution for this, by the way, with their Sketchfab for Teams. And then it's about the actual decimation of that data. And there's kind of a spectrum here, right? The more you decimate it, the cheaper your compute costs and the less performant GPU you need. And then all the way to the point of maybe you don't even need streaming if you can put enough upstream effort of decimating. Now, most customers don't want to do that. That's why we work with companies like HoloLite, but that process still has to happen. So what we do is we actually help them do it in a much faster way. So good example, we actually did a POC with BMW, and we containerized Unreal Datasmith, which is Unreal's version of like Pixies. Maybe you guys have heard of Pixies before. It's one of the leaders in CAD optimization. And it took BMW 14 hours to convert one CATIA file, right? And they're trying to convert hundreds of different car models for hundreds of different use cases. And so it's just not a scalable process, massive content bottleneck that's occurring. And so what we did is we actually containerized Datasmith, ran it in the cloud with some serverless products that we have, like Lambda, which means you don't have to go actually provision compute infrastructure on AWS. You can just use Lambda, and it knows exactly how much compute to get at the right time. So it's an event-driven architecture where all you're doing is dragging and dropping CAD files into a storage bucket, S3 in the cloud. Lambda is event-based. When that S3, when that CAD file appears, it triggers this awesome fan out of containers of under Datasmith that now you have, hundreds of vCPUs working to break down that one CAD file. So we took a 14-hour process down to 10 minutes. Think about how that scales in terms of creating content. It's wild, the efficiency, and then super cost effective too. It's very, very cheap. I think it was like maybe $4 in compute cost, and close to $100 in total for that process. But so once we get that, I'm gonna toss into the chat here just an example so people can see. So this is an example of that architecture I just mentioned. We built this out not with Unreal, but with Pixies. And you can click on that, some documentation there that kind of walks you through that process. And we actually have a marketplace offering as well. Shameless shilling here of AWS services.
No problem.
Yeah. But grab those documents. I think you'll find it really interesting. So if we can do really solid decimation, get some lighter weight models, then we can start talking about GPUs and their performance. Now, sometimes you just need the beefiest, heaviest, most performant GPU, right? So you're rendering Unreal 5, which looks incredible if you all haven't seen it yet. And so like the best in class GPU we have right now is really our P3 series, which is a what is it? I think it's a Tesla. It's NVIDIA Tesla V100 GPU. Primarily for machine learning, but works really nicely for GPU rendering, for visualization. And from there, we have two other GPUs that we offer. It's within our G4 family. The most common one that we use, that Hala uses the most frequently, is our G4, which is an NVIDIA T4 Tensor GPU. But then we just released a new GPU that actually has 45% better price to performance ratio. And that's a big challenge with this, is GPU cost. And the biggest problem with all this is that there's no cloud GPUs out there that I'm aware of, at least yet, that allow for multiple users on one GPU. These exist as like consumer grade on-prem GPUs, but for cloud GPUs, I don't know of a cloud vendor that allows multiple users on one GPU, which would dramatically lower the cost per head, right? Today, it's a 1-to-1 GPU per user experience. So the costs are high. Costs are high if you're doing like the BMW example and you're trying to get 2,400 retail outlets, doing streaming. When it's more of a one-off basis with like a few engineers, the costs don't get too astronomical. Yeah, so that's the GPU store. You guys can go online and check out various GPUs. If you want to check out the mothership GPU that's the most powerful, I just tossed the NVIDIA Tesla P3 series. So next is what is your connectivity like? And this is probably, I'll let Lewis maybe +1 here, but I think this is probably the biggest challenge, because it's something that we can't solve. It requires a very motivated customer to go out there and build out their own dedicated Wi-Fi network to make this really work. We've seen like with some streaming solutions, it's like you need 50 megabits up and down. It's a fat pipe. If you have multiple users, the bandwidth limitations happen pretty quickly. HoloLight, I think you guys need a lot less. Lewis, what is your megabits required up and down?
Yeah, so 20 Mbit is required and also recommended. Below it gets a bit difficult. Yeah. And for latency, it depends on also your use case a little bit, because the more real time you need, the lower the latency has to be. But we have customers that have like latency requirements in their use case between 50 and 100 milliseconds. So we try with like algorithms to prediction algorithms to simplify it and to make it very stable and independent from the connectivity as good as possible.
Algorithms. They work. We've seen it. So yeah, the connectivity and then the latency are very use case dependent. If you're doing the digital overlays, like I mentioned before, you got things that be rock solid on that piece of equipment in that spot. You need super low latency. And I think you need like sub 20 millisecond, 20 to 50 millisecond latency for like overlay based AR. If you're doing the stuff like the video Lewis showed, which is more like a design review kind of car configurator, just visualizing, people are getting away with 100 to 200 milliseconds of latency. It's not that perceived if it's there. And I think you guys do some late latching stuff, right, Lewis, to kind of make the perceived latency a lot lower. Yeah. So even if you have like 150, 200 milliseconds latency, it looks like it's 50 to 100. Those aren't the exact numbers, but it's in that order of magnitude. And then of course, from there, then we're talking about the streaming solution. So, we work closely with HoloLight, can +1 on what Suzie said, very great people. Yeah, we've done some cool blog posts. I just tossed a blog post into the Chime chat. And then what we're doing to get people easy access to streaming solutions is we're actually having them purchase and acquire them on the AWS marketplace. You need to add one of those links, by the way, Lewis, to your little last slide deck. The call to action slide. We gotta get this.
Yes, absolutely. You're right.
We gotta get this link I just tossed in there. So this is a link to the marketplace offering for HoloLight's Aries solution, and Aries is the actual application versus ISAR SDK, which that'll come to the marketplace sometime soon. But yeah, what's great about this is this allows customers to quickly provision the streaming solution and go through AWS billing. So I mean, as a startup, companies like BMW don't love having to go through procurement with a small startup. No offense, Lewis. It's hard for people like Nicholas to push that through and make that case. But if we can just do it on our paper on one contract with AWS, it's much easier from a sales cycle perspective and billing. But it also allows our customers to apply their spend with HoloLight to their enterprise discount plans. So right, we'll cut a big deal with BMW. We'll give them 15-10% off if they hit a certain amount of cloud spend. And so customers love being able to apply anything they can to that EDP number. So yeah, covered most of the stack, from GPUs to the 3D pipelines to the delivery to latency. I think that covers most of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Evan. I think that helps provide a lot of extra context as well, and sort of seeing how the relationship would work between sort of a streaming partner like HoloLight and maybe an end customer like a BMW, and seeing sort of how those relationships play out. We already talked about this a little bit, so we'll touch into it briefly. I want to make sure we have time for Q&A at the end. But Nico, we've had some easy questions. Let's talk about some of the hard ones. What are some of the challenges that you're facing, and sort of how are you fixing them? And how is streaming playing a part in you fixing them?
For sure, yeah. So actually there's a bunch of challenges when you try to implement new XR solutions in an enterprise context. Otherwise it would be boring. So as I mentioned earlier, XR streaming can really help in many of these cases. Just to give you a few examples, Evan already touched on one of the biggest challenges, which is the content creation and data preparation processes. So almost all of our use cases rely on high amounts of data. And because of the limited processing power, these data sets usually have to be reduced in a really long and cumbersome manual data simplification process. And this really hurts the real-time capability of our use cases as well. Because every time a design or a concept changes, which can happen quite frequently in early design stages, an expert has to first convert and simplify the new CAD models before it can be visualized in XR. And with XR streaming, on the other hand, thanks to the potentially unlimited processing power that we have, we can now visualize 3D content of any size, allowing us to stream not only entire cars, but also the surrounding plant sections, for example, without any manual intervention. So we call this XR at the push of a button, meaning that we have a seamless transition between traditional classical 2D visualization and more intuitive 3D experiences. And a second challenge that we see is efficient content distribution. So taking up the example from Evan about training, yes, the content itself isn't necessarily that complex in these trainings, but we have to distribute new trainings for every new car model that we launch every year. So our factory workers now are being trained with AR glasses, with the HoloLens, and we have more than 50,000 of factory workers that have to be trained. And so with this new AR-based training solutions, we are able to give every factory worker the possibility to learn at their own pace and in their preferred modality how to assemble this new car line, making the training itself way more efficient. But with every new car, as I said, we have to build and distribute new training data. And before we had to upload this data manually on these HoloLenses, on these devices. Now with XR streaming, we can distribute all the data automatically and practically over the air. So we reduce setup times drastically. And maybe a last example or last challenge, the fragmentation of XR devices. So at this point in time, there's not really one singular XR device that is suited for every XR use case that's out there. So instead, we use lots of different HMDs depending on the specific use case. And here, the combination of game engines for the production of XR experiences and XR streaming helps us to build device-agnostic XR applications and experiences, meaning that all the computational magic happens somewhere on the cloud or on-premise on a powerful rendering instance, and the HMD is basically just a visualization client. Also, this makes our applications future-proof because we will be able to upgrade them to new devices easily, without having to go through major code adaptations. So all in all, I think in every step of implementing, applying, and managing your XR solutions, XR streaming can be a possible benefit, making it really a highly relevant technology for us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nico. And I know, Lewis, we've talked about fragmentation in the past. Is there anything you want to add to that before we dive to the next question?
Well, yeah, I can just agree that there is a variety of XR hardware devices out there on the market, and especially also not just for the user side, but also for the ISV and developer side, it's always a question which devices are you going to support in the next years? Because it's really like that. If you just think about an engineering use case, it can be in some cases beneficial to have an AR smart glasses, and in some other cases, it's nice to have a VR glasses. And next time you want to have somebody joining a collaborative session with their smartphone. And for the developer side, it's efforts to support the several devices, because there are some changes or differences. And that's why we wanted to focus with the streaming part also, especially on this topic. Think about having one server application streamed to several devices. The user is basically, or the XR device is the access point to the original application running on the server. And I think this idea opens up many great opportunities, and not just in the enterprise market, but if we look one step forward, then also for the consumer market. And that's why, yeah, we like this a lot. And also what Nico mentioned, the distribution and the maintenance of an AR/VR application gets much better, because it's just about updating one application on the server and not going to all the stores and wait for several days or weeks until the new update is out there. And so distribution becomes also better. And yeah, so addressing these challenges, that was basically the reason why we did the topic and focused on that.
Awesome. Thank you, Lewis. So Suzie, let's go for your trick question or your difficult question. Let's make it nice and big. And so I guess the billion-dollar question we're all asking, or maybe even the trillion-dollar question, is what's holding us all back? Why don't we have this yet? What's holding AR back? And so what are the things that you would just dream of that would just make your life so much better? Yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah. So I have kind of a, I guess, controversial opinion on this. I don't think that it's, broadly speaking, whether it's AR, XR, VR, I don't think it's the headsets. I don't think it's the hardware. I don't think it's adoption, really. I do believe that people are really excited to put on headsets. They want these headsets to provide solutions to the problems that they're experiencing. And we, when I go into meetings with people, they all want this technology to solve their problem. The thing that ends up causing the issues is the lack of defined use cases and general usability of the software, and just the limitations of the processing power of these mobile headsets. People don't want to be tethered to computers. Many of these use cases and solutions that people want require mobile devices that are not tethered. But as we've all been discussing, those mobile devices until now have really been limited in the processing power that's available to them. So, I think if we can solve that challenge, that will address at least one of the things that I really strongly feel is holding back the entire industry. So that's really exciting. In terms of usability, and design, and of course, this is something that I'm passionate about because I am a UX designer, I'm a product designer. The question we need to really think about is how can we build great application experiences that could only exist on immersive hardware? I do feel like a lot of the times XR is added into 2D workflows sort of as an add-on and not as a standalone solution. And I think that as an industry, we really need to hone in on those specific problems and use cases that can only really be solved using immersive hardware to really illustrate the value of it to end users, whether those be businesses, whether those be consumers eventually. Just defining that value in that sense would be very, very important for the industry as a whole and for people to really take everything much more seriously. Also really trying to solve problems that a 2D product can't solve. And so I think AR, that being said, I think XR AR is not a solution for every use case and for everyone, but in certain places, it is completely transformational. So hone in on that, really go home with that. And as the hardware, software, the industry in general continues to evolve, I think more and more of those transformational applications will come to light. So for us, BadVR, we have one customer, for example, in the telecom industry. We have a product called C-Signal, which allows you to put on an AR headset and see your wireless Bluetooth and cellular networks overlaid on your real environment. In that telecom industry, one of our customers says that they can never go back to flat screens or screens in general after having seen that data in that particular format. And that's really, in my opinion, how we know the next era of computing is truly spatial, and that we all are at the forefront of that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Suzie. Well, we are coming to the end of our time, and I want to make sure we have a little bit of time for Q&A. So let's do just one last question here for you, Evan, and maybe Suzie, you can jump in if you'd like as well. We had addressed earlier this concept of business models changing. And so what is streaming going to do in terms of changing how you operate at AWS and opening up opportunities for others, or what does that mean for developers or even end users?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it definitely makes deploying a SaaS application a no-brainer in most cases. And Lewis talked about some of those benefits of distribution. So thinking about running a SaaS business model is definitely going to be key, but there's challenges there, at least in the short term today. I mentioned before, GPU cost being really high. And so, and I talked about our marketplace as a place to deploy and have customers deploy or procure applications. And so I think the best way to do it is going to be to have companies build containers, right? You can still figure out like a pay-per-use business model through that container, right? You can have it be on a per minute or a per hour basis, or you can have a licensing model. That's really a personal preference for the startup or the company. But that container is going to allow that application to be deployed anywhere. And where I think you can start to get around some of the GPU cost issues is with some of our edge compute offerings, not just ours, any edge compute offering. And so today we have Outpost, and Outpost is this 41U rack that costs $1 million+ $500,000. It's not a good solution when you're trying to just go after the streaming use case. But we announced that reInvent last year, Amazon Outpost. I can't say the actual name of it. I call it Baby Outpost. It's just a much smaller outpost. It's like a pizza box size, 1U, 2U rack. Maybe it's going to cost between 10 to 50K, maybe a bit less for one of these blades. But at that point, you have a discrete compute platform, right? Where it's not unlimited usage, millions of users on-demand usage going off the charts. It's a discrete compute platform. You're not worrying about tons of GPU overhead and expenses, and you can drop a container on it and deploy it from within any data center, any conference room, any factory environment, and still be able to charge a pay-per-use on-demand model, because it still connects back up to the AWS region and cloud, where we can do that metering. So that's the way I'd be thinking about it if I was a startup and developer. And yeah, I think another business model that I'll just bring up quickly, I think is interesting in use case, since we have to go, and some people could roll their eyes because it's such a buzzword these days. But companies like BMW, they have a 3D model of a car, and you got companies like Nike with 3D models, and you got companies like Gucci with 3D models for design review use cases. And our conversation is oftentimes, okay, you have this valuable asset. It was very hard to make, very, very hard, but it's a cost center, this asset. It's not a revenue producing asset. And so how can you turn the digital asset into a product? And so that's where we start talking about NFTs and crypto. And okay, so now you have this BMW car, this Nike pair of shoes. Nike has crypto kicks as a patent that's out there in the world. They already have Air Jordans in Fortnite. But you don't, everyone here probably knows the NFT pitch, but you don't own that, right? With NFT, you can't own that 3D file, and it is scarce. And a lot of people, what one of the objections is, oh, that 3D file, I have it, you have it. Well, NFT changes that in a way, but you can still, if you have to deploy that 3D file to like all these devices to show it off, there's security concerns about, okay, that JPEG, and you can extract it, and then where is the scarcity in that really? And it creates all these questions about scarcity and security. Well, if you can actually stream that asset over IPFS, which is like a blockchain-based file system. Now you can have truly secure in the cloud-based NFTs. You're streaming into Fortnite, streaming into the BMW retail center, and you turn that 3D model into a revenue-producing asset as well. I think that's a huge thing. That's the future of this, the future of the metaverse. It's where we're all going with the AR cloud story that Ori likes to tell. And that is the future, in my opinion, for streaming, is NFT streaming.
I love it. No, it takes us full circle to certainly what's trending now. Suzie, anything you want to add in terms of like pay per use from business model perspective?
Yeah. I think pay per use is great in terms of lowering the barrier to entry, especially for people who may be a little bit skeptical about whether or not XR solutions would be viable to their problem. It just requires sort of or encourages, people to give, the solution a try in some scaled down capacity. And it also allows them to scale up if that solution does work with a lot more flexibility. It can also be easier to budget in certain industries where they can accurately estimate or measure technician interaction with the tools. But on the flip side of that, there are certain instances where I think it is somewhat problematic. You have to really be sensitive about user data. And some companies are very sensitive about that, understandably so. And pay per use in that sense could be a little bit intrusive. So as long as you're careful who you present that solution to and how you present it, I do think there's a lot more positives than there are negatives, but just overall from a very 10,000 foot view, I do think it's great in terms of lowering that barrier to entry and just allowing people to dip their toe in, give it a try, engage with it in some capacity, just to begin to understand the power of it, the potential solution that it could offer, because there are quite a few people that still see XR technology as a gaming only platform. It's something that their teenage kid does. So when you allow them to really try it and actually have it solve a real problem for them on a small scale, and then also offer that flexibility scaling up, it's fantastic. So.
Awesome. No, thank you for that. And I think that's a great way to kind of close out our formal questions. I want to thank all of you for being here today. Now, please, if you're in the audience and you have a question for our panelists, I do want to be sensitive to their time, and we are now at the hour. Please go ahead and pop those questions into the chat, and we'll look at those shortly. Before we hop into that, however, I do want to give our sponsor a shout out. Thank you so much, Louis. Do you have any final words that you want to share with us today before we dive into some Q&A?
No, one thing I would like to add. So I think that with XR streaming, we talked about an invisible technology of the future. But I think if you will consume an AR/VR application in the future, in the next years, you can be sure that it will be a streamed application. And I think that's great to talk about a topic that is actually behind the scenes. And yeah, I can just recommend to engage more with the topic. And thank you very much, Gavin, also for hosting us. And hope to see you then at the next AWE events in person. We're definitely going to join.
Awesome. Yeah, no, looking forward to seeing everyone again in person again as well. Well, a couple of questions that I did see come in here, so we'll try to keep it limited, nice and easy. The first is actually a question about medical devices. So does any of the panelists want to talk about any medical use cases that they've seen or can elaborate on that in any way?
I have to go in a minute, so I'll just jump in and plug that. That's one of the top industries we're seeing traction in, and we're streaming so often needed because those devices are just complex and usually pretty heavy CAD models. The largest medical device company in the world, one of them was like, yeah, we don't have a single use case, whether it's training or retail or whatever, sales that doesn't need streaming. So I'll just leave it at that.
Awesome. Thank you, Evan. And yeah, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, great to see everybody.
Yeah, last question then for the day. I have it here. Let's talk about data security. So Nico, I think this one's a good one for you because I know talk about BMW a lot, but I imagine your models are important to you. So how are you thinking about XR streaming in the context of sort of keeping your information secure and confidential?
Yeah, great question, Gavin. So data security, as you already said, is a really highly relevant topic for us. Our market research shows time and again that the design of our cars is still the #1 reason why our customers choose to buy a BMW. And this holds true also for other premium automotive OEMs. So therefore, the design of a car, regardless whether we're talking about exterior or interior design, is one of the most important and sensitive IPs of our company. And it's therefore of utmost importance to protect this data from leaking to the public or third parties. And the benefit that XR streaming brings to the table in this context is the fact that we can visualize any design data in 3D without our users having to handle any actual data files, because no data needs to be stored locally on the devices. So instead of XR applications running on my mobile device, it runs on a secure infrastructure, and we have full control of where the confidential data is located and who has access to it. So we reduce the risks of data leaks or thefts significantly. So yeah, to make it short, very important topic.
Awesome. No, thank you so much. And I think that's a great way to end today's conversation. So thank you again to all of our panelists for being here today. Round of applause. I know we can't hear everyone, but you definitely have it from me. There we go. Yeah, perfect. And thank you for all of those that tuned in with us today. We will be saving this this session and putting it on the YouTube channel if there's anything you want to do. And of course, feel free to reach out to any of the panelists directly. And we look forward to seeing you at our next session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you very
having
much,
us.
guys.